Yes, it's fine. Hello. So today is Friday, and I decided not to start a new book today. Um, I also thought, well, April is National Poetry Month, and I haven't read any poetry to you guys yet, so I thought I would do some selected poetry readings today, and then we'll start a new book on Monday instead. So I'm Miss Carla. Welcome. I went through my library at home, which is a lot of books, and I grabbed some of my poetry books. There's this stack. There's this stack. There's this. This is not just poetry, but it's got poetry in it. I'm not going to read all these, I promise. I'm just going to read a few poems here and there. And I've put some little markers so I know what I'm going to read. And I'm ready to go. The first selection I'm going to read is from a book called Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. And this is a novel in verse. So that means it's a whole book, it's a whole story, but everything in it is in verse or poem form. So I'm going to start with three selections from this story. And this is a really good book, and I highly recommend you read the whole thing if you have the chance. It's about Jacqueline Woodson's life when she was a little girl, growing up in South Carolina and then in New York. So it's really interesting, and she's a wonderful writer. And this book, as you can see, was a National Book Award finalist. So I'm just going to read a few poems from towards the end. Each, instead of like chapters, it's split into poems. So the first one I'm going to read is called Graffiti. You'll notice there's some highlights and notes in this book. This is my personal book, and I do tend to write in my own books, but I would never write or highlight in a library book, so just keep that in mind. Graffiti. Your tag is your name written with spray paint, however you want it, wherever you want it to be. It doesn't even have to be your real name, like Loco, who lives on Woodbine Street. His real name is Orlando, but everyone calls him by his tag, so it's everywhere in Bushwick. Black and red letters and crazy eyes inside the O's. Some kids climb to the tops of buildings, hang over the edge, spray their names upside down from there. But me and Maria only know the ground, only know the factory on the corner with its newly painted bright pink wall. Only know the way my heart jumps as I press the button down, hear the hiss of paint, watch J-A-C begin. Only know the sound of my uncle's voice, stopping me before my name is a part of the history, like the ones on the roofs and fire escapes and subway cars. I wish I could explain. Wish I had the words to stop his anger, stop the force of him grabbing my hand. Wish I knew how to say, just let me write everywhere. But my uncle keeps asking over and over again, what's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? Don't you know people get arrested for this? They're just words, I whisper. They're not trying to hurt anybody. This one is called The Promised Land. The Promised Land. When my uncle gets out of jail, he isn't just my uncle anymore. He is Robert the Muslim and wears a small black kufi on his head. And even though we know we witnesses are the chosen ones, we listen to the stories he tells about a man named Muhammad and a holy place called Mecca and the strength of all Black people. We sit in a circle around him, his hands moving slow through the air, his voice calmer and quieter than it was before he went away. When he pulls out a small rug to pray on, I kneel beside him, wanting to see his Mecca, wanting to know the place he calls the Promised Land. Look with your heart and your head, he tells me, his own head bowed. It's out there in front of you. You'll know when you get there. The last one, this one, is called A Writer. You're a writer, Miss Vivo says, her gray eyes bright behind thin wire frames, her smile bigger than anything, so I smile back, happy to hear these words from a teacher's mouth. She is a feminist, she tells us, and 35th grade hands bend into desks where our dictionaries wait to open yet another world to us. Miss Vivo pauses, watches our fingers fly. Webster's has our answers. Equal rights, a boy named Andrew yells out. For women. My hands freeze on the thin white pages. Like blacks, Miss Vivo, too, is part of a revolution. But right now, that revolution is so far away from me. This moment, this here, this right now, is my teacher saying, You're a writer, as she holds the poem I am just beginning, the first 4 lines stolen from my sister. Black brothers, black sisters, all of them were great. No fear, no fright, but a willingness to fight. You can have them, Dell said when she saw. I don't want to be a poet. And then my own pencil moving late into the evening. In big fine houses lived the whites, in little old shacks lived the blacks. But the blacks were smart, in fear they took no part. One of them was Martin, with a heart of gold. You're a writer, Miss Vivo says, holding my poem out to me. And standing in front of the class, taking my poem from her, my voice shakes as I recite the first line. Black brothers, black sisters, all of them were great. But my voice grows stronger with each word because, more than anything else in the world, I want to believe her. I love that part of this book because this is where Jacqueline, as a child, a young black girl, realized she really could write. She could put all of her effort into writing poetry, and it was important and it was worth it. And I love that her teacher encouraged her. And you can see how, even though this whole thing is a poem, there are little bits of a poem inside of it, too. So I think that's really interesting. So that's from Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. Here's a picture of her. She's wonderful. I've met her in person, I think 2 times. She's a really good author. The next one I'm going to read is from this book. Now, this is more like a journal published by a college in Michigan called Ferris State University. And their language and literature department publishes one of these every year, I think, or every half of a year. I'm not sure. It's called Prism, and it's from 2006. The reason I'm reading this very obscure journal is because I'm in it. In 2006, I was a college student at Ferris State University, and I submitted a poem to a contest to be published in this little journal. And I was entered as an honorable mention in poetry. See, there's my name. Carla Rennick, The Road Home. So I'm just going to read my poem for you so you can see. Pretty exciting to be in a book. Streetlights stare blankly back at my headlights. Leaves whirl over drying pavement. My small town is cool and empty. The long hilly road is strewn with tree branches, the kindling crunching under my rubber tires, the log-sized limbs steering me through a swerving course. Apples scattered along the edge, small and fresh, round and pink, line the sides in bright clusters on the pale dirt road. A canopy of bare limbs fidgets overhead. A cold, low, wrinkled sky hovers over a lonely world. Miles from town, in the center of my world, lies a small white house, a garage, a doghouse. Home to me, the beginning and the destination. It's my little poem. Also autobiographical, like Jacqueline Woodson's, but much shorter. Let's see, I have a few other selections picked out. This is a whole book of poetry by T.S. Eliot. He's a very famous poet from a little over 100 years ago. And the main poem in this is called The Wasteland. And it's sort of similar to the book in verse in that it's a whole long story. But this is more, instead of having characters and things that happen, this is more just a thought about the way things in the world are. So this has got a very long poem in it, but it also has some shorter poems. And I decided to read one of those little short ones. It's in a section called Landscapes. And so there are 3 little poems in here about different parts of the United States. And I'm going to read the one called New Hampshire, because that one's kind of nearby. Children's voices in the orchard, between the blossom and the fruit time. Golden head, crimson head, between the green tip and the root. Black wing, brown wing, hover over. 20 years and the spring is over. Today grieves, tomorrow grieves. Cover me over, light in leaves. Golden head, black wing, cling, swing, spring, sing, swing up into the apple tree. There's a lot going on in there. I heard words about birds, black wing, brown wing. I heard words about kids, about flowers, about fruit. It's a lot of very interesting nature poem. This is another very famous poet named Carl Sandburg. And this is a book called Harvest Poems. And again, there's a whole bunch in here, but I just wanted to read a couple short ones. This one is very short. Look, it only takes up that much of the page. It's called Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. That's interesting to compare fog in a city to a cat. Very soft footsteps, I guess. Then, this one's called Small Homes, and it's only four lines long. And in this one, the small homes are flowers, and the people who live in the homes are bugs. The green bug sleeps in the white lily ear. The red bug sleeps in the white magnolia. Shiny wings, you are choosers of color. You have taken your summer bungalows wisely. Bungalow, if you didn't know, is a word for a kind of house. So he's just saying that the bugs that have shiny wings think about where they want to sleep for the summer based on how pretty the flower is. All right. Okay. Robert Frost is another very famous American poet. And he has lots of poems, as you can see. These are all poems in this book. He also wrote about nature. I like nature poems. He wrote about other things, but he was very popular for writing about nature. You may have heard the line, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. That's one of probably his most famous poem. But I'm going to read a poem called Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. And this is about in the olden days when I can't remember if he's riding a horse or maybe driving a carriage pulled by a horse in the snow. And the horse, so he's got a horse and he's stopping next to the woods and it's snowy. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. That's the end of that poem. You may have noticed that most of the poems I'm reading don't have rhymes in them like you might expect, but that one did. Had a very interesting rhyme scheme, meaning the order of the rhyming. I won't take the time to point it out now, but it's pretty cool. It sounds nice to read it out loud, doesn't it? All right. I think I'm just going to read the one poem from this book. This is a book called Modern American and British Poetry, and it was put together by Louis Untermeyer. But as you might notice, this is a very old book. So modern is relative. When this book was published, these poems may have been modern, but it was published in 1922. So that's pretty old-timey for us nowadays. The poem I'm going to read is by Joyce Kilmer, and it's called Trees. And it was written it was published in 1914. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the sweet earth's flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. I really love the comparison of a tree to a poem, especially since so many poems are written about trees. All right, I think that's all the poems I'm going to read for today. This is going to be a short one, but I did want to show you this cool thing that I have, which is fun all year round, but especially during National Poetry Month. If you want to write a poem, but you can't think of any words off the top of your head, or you want some inspiration, magnetic poetry is a great way to go. I usually have this up at the library, at Fox Point Library where I work, but I took it home with me so I could show you. This is just metal, and these are all little magnets with words on them. Some people already made these poems before we closed the building, and it says, "Come seek laughter between your comfort whisper. Fill a blue sky which true peace and happiness almost dreams with her. Fortune shared with a shining heart, better when old. Believe, bluebird, possibility." So as you can see, when you only have certain words to pick from, you might not get a whole lot of sentences, but you can still create a lot of feeling by putting certain words together. And I thought, well, not everybody has a magnetic poetry set. This is actually a few different sets that I bought. And all the words come in a handy little box, and then you can put them on your fridge or anything else that magnets will stick to. But then I thought, you know what most of us do have access to, hopefully, is words on paper. So particularly newspapers or magazines, if you have some at home that nobody's reading anymore, that you have permission to cut up, you could cut the words out, just like these are individual words cut out. And you could cut them out and arrange them on a piece of paper. You could glue them down or tape them down, or you could just arrange them on a table like a puzzle. And you could use that as a way to help inspire yourself to write your own poetry. That was just an idea I had. Maybe if I make one of those this weekend, I'll show you what I come up with. But don't cut up any papers that you don't have permission to cut up, okay? And don't cut up any library books. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody. I will see you all on Monday, and we will start a new chapter book on Monday. Bye-bye.